Okay, so I think these are the right slides. Hello, I'm Jian from AI Singapore. Again, this is another attempt at doing open models, maybe from more Southeast Asia or Asia perspective. I have a lot of slides. I won't go into too much detail for most of them, and there's a lot of stuff that we can, of course, discuss after the presentation itself. Okay, so I'll be talking today about sea lion, right? We have quite a few variants by now. And we'll get into that. But before that, maybe I'll explain a little bit about what AI Singapore is. We've actually been around for quite a few years now, 8 years or so. And of course, that was pre-ChatGPT, right? But the mission has stayed the same, right? We want to build national capabilities and regional capabilities. We want to create social and economic impacts, grow talent, accelerate the AI ecosystem, and so on, right? And we have quite a few pillars in AI Singapore now. The one that is in charge of the Sea Lion and Sea Hound projects are from AI products, and that's where I'm from as well, right? So, I won't go through too much of the next few slides because I know everybody here knows this, but it's it started the Sea Lion project started because we didn't see that this gap was being addressed, right? There is this diversity challenge, right? And at the time, ChatGPT seemed to solve, quote unquote, a lot of language related issues. And I guess the gap is closing, right? But there's still a lot of there's still a lot that remains to be done on the fronts of like multiculturalism, safety, and so on, right? So it's still very relevant. And of course, if you don't do all of that correctly, then you're gonna have disconnect with cultural diversity, risk of exclusion, and so on. These are really real problems, right? So the bias part, we think of it in a few different ways, and we want to tackle the different types of biases. I guess the most important one for the people, or the most interesting one for the people here, would be the data bias and the algorithmic biases, right? So happy to talk about that a little bit more later as well. Um, Skip this. I'll focus a little bit more on some of the more technical stuff later on. Okay, so I talked about multicultural and multilingual by design, right? And we want our model to be regionally excellent. But we also have this added challenge of trying to address the need for multimodality, right? And there's also another added challenge for our region, which is that we have to be resource efficient, right? There are a lot of places in Southeast Asia, especially where people even have trouble accessing the internet or accessing like electricity, right? Some places, there are specific timings for which you actually can access electricity, right? So what people have will be their phones, right? Which might not even be like the latest iPhone and so on. So it's a real problem, but we want to try our best to be able to one day reach these groups as well and allow them to really empower themselves with AI tools, right? But to do all of this, our models still need to be safe and secure, right? And it's difficult, right? But in order to be inclusive, we really need to be open, and we really need to position ourselves as being willing to cooperate with the region and internationally, right? So that's really something that we want to do. So we have a few guiding principles. I think this has been brought up in quite a few of the presentations before as well. We want to give users the choice, right, between whether they want to just, ping OpenAI's API or Google's API and so on, or if they really want to have open models that they want to use as well, right? Some people are happy to, buy some training recipes from, say, like Mistral or something to train their models, right? But some people want to build their own or build on top of open models. We also want to give them that choice, right? And then, of course, there's this huge discussion between the East versus the West, right? And Europe, right, is also, Europe is more an open front, but this East and West thing is the way that we see it, a lot of it is more centered around like, it's kind of like the race towards the next frontier in AI, so to speak, right? And most of them will be closed, right? And then there's also, we want to give people the choice of model independence. We don't want people to be locked into a specific architecture or a specific company, right? So to do all of this, we have to stay open. We want to give people visibility into how we build our models. We want to give visibility into how we build our data. And also we have evaluations that are public, and the data as well is publicly available. although nowadays it's a bit difficult to, it's a bit of a challenge to really open up all of the evaluation data because benchmarks get saturated very quickly. Can't say for sure, but I suppose a lot of people train on the evaluation data as well, right? This is something that we wouldn't necessarily know about, but it's a problem that we also struggle with. How to be open and transparent while trying not to kind of like shoot ourselves in the foot with really trying to figure out how models are progressing, right? Okay, we also want to release more checkpoints. This is something that we are working on. But you know, in the spirit of being open is something I want to do. Of course, you have to be responsible, right? And we want to make sure that in the way that we align the model, in the way we build the model and deploy the models, we do all of this, right, in an inclusive manner. We have to be representative, meaning that we have to work with the communities and we have to let the communities have their own voices in how they think they should be represented, right? This is something that is in progress because it's not feasible to really get to the stage where everyone gets their own say, right? Practically speaking, you have to work with select groups and then you start iterating from there, right? But it is our hope that we can be collaborative in doing all of this. So the way that we want to position Sea Lion really is that it's not meant to be a competitor to really like all of the super frontier models out there, but we do want to complement these models where they may still have some gaps, right? Because the way that we see it, the really powerful closed models out there, right? They are more international by nature, right? Their capabilities are really kind of like reflective of where the strongest or most high demand markets might be. But that also means that there will be certain key areas of, to us, key areas that get left behind, right? Southeast Asia being one of them. So we really want to be able to complement essentially a system, right? Uh, and have Sea Lion kind of like power a system that can also account, right, for more low resource regions. So, okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do data collection and data curation for multilingual and multicultural purposes, right? So, you see my mouse? Okay. So, I'd like to put your focus on these two stars here, right? And also just to note, this is a little bit outdated, right? The deduplication is something that we used to do, but not so much anymore, right? Now we do more of we have like a data set and then we do sampling. You know, the OMO team talked about this just now. So we do random sampling based on like a proportion that we determine beforehand, and we have different data mixes, right? Okay, so I'll talk about quality signals first, right? So these quality signals really are specific to each of the languages that we want to target, right? We're targeting the major languages in Southeast Asia. So Indonesian, Vietnamese, Thai will be relatively more high resource, but we also look at other languages like Tamil, Burmese, Khmer, Lao, right? Filipino. So those are more low resource, but we also recognize that there are many different scripts and different morphological patterns. So we cannot really have a one size fits all kind of quality signaling. So that's something that we took a lot of time to figure out. And then the other one is the perplexity thresholds. Again, here we have to be very careful about not applying a one size fits all approach, right? And all of this goes into ultimately what will be our pre-processing for the data, right? So okay, let's look a little bit more closely, right, at what we're doing here. In order to get the quality signal, we really need to be able to develop, right, specific algorithms, right? We try to run some evaluations on like a lower token budget, but how good these are, we don't really know yet. I think we need to do quite a few more experiments, but these would be very expensive, right? As Hector pointed out in the previous presentation. It's a very basic UI. So this is what our annotators see when they're trying to do the quality signal, when they're trying to determine the quality signal, right? You'll see that they can filter certain along a few axes, right? So for example, you can look at the token count of the document. You can look at how much the repetition ratios and so on, right? So all of these toggles allow the annotators to see like, okay, if I move some of these around, what happens? And then what gets retained and what gets discarded. This one is a bit tricky. I will say that discarded doesn't always mean that it's bad. It can mean that the data is actually more conversational or more informal in nature, right? Because this depends on the way that the language detection is set up. So, for example, in Indonesian, right, you have formal Indonesian and informal Indonesian, and in Tamil you have the same thing. Quite a few of the C languages actually. And what really happens is that the language filter is built to detect the formal variety, but not so much the informal variety, right? So it's an important caveat that we have here that even as we do this quality signal process, some of the data that gets discarded is not always bad data, right? But it's difficult for us to truly determine like how much of it is still valuable, and that's something that is still in iteration. So alongside of the quality signal, we also look at the perplexity score, right? So lower complexity is better, right? We have three general categories, right? Head, middle, tail, kind of you can think of it as corresponding to high quality, medium quality, low quality. And again, here, this is our way of trying to get a sense of like, okay, even for the low quality data, there is a need to keep some of it. There is a need to still include it in the data mix, because this can actually be vernacular speech, but data that if we just discard entirely, it doesn't get represented, right? So if you look at the small graph down here, right, you get a nice distribution of complexity, and then based on that, we also use that to help us to inform some of our data mixes. We want to be as open as we can, right, in building our models. So very happy to say that it took a while, but we submitted our Sea Lion V3 paper to AACL last year. And I'm also very proud of the team for getting the Best Resource Award based on this paper. And we hope to be able to do more of this as we go on. But resource time constraint is a real thing, right? So while we want to write more papers, it's really difficult, right? We have a small team, so do bear with us if we aren't always as timely with some of our publications. Okay, so some of the more important things to look at here, right? I hope you can read what's written here, but I'll read it out for you as well. So we found that Llama Sea Lion, right, is a stronger starting point for post-training as compared to Llama 3.18b, right? So when thinking about which base model to use for post-training, we were looking at our Seaham results, and we figured, okay, looks like generally speaking, we built in a little bit more multilingual capabilities into our Llama Sea Lion. So let's start from there for the post-training, right? And maybe not surprisingly, we see a lot of catastrophic forgetting, right, of Llama's instruct capabilities when we do continue pre-training, right? But this is to be expected. How exactly do we measure what is being forgotten and whether that's valuable or not is something that we're still trying to figure out. It's not easy. Okay. Here is kind of like a flow chart of how we did the post-training pipeline for the Llama and Gemma variants of V3, right? You'll see that for Llama, there is an additional merging of checkpoints, right? So we merged in Llama 3.3 as well, right? Even though the base model is Llama 3.1 at the time. And we had to do quite a bit of merging at the time because we needed to try and balance out some of the capabilities that the model had lost in the pre-training and in the post-training as well. And then, of course, along the way, we also do a lot of evaluations, right? And this actually adds to the difficulty of trying to really report exactly what was done, because a lot of evaluations are done at intermediate checkpoints. And yeah, in order to have a fast enough turnaround time, right, for doing all of this, which already takes a lot of manual effort in that sense, it's really difficult to keep track of everything, so to speak, which we understand is a problem for reproducibility, but we're still trying to wrap our heads around how to do this better. So I mentioned C-Helm, right? So C-Helm is built in partnership with Stanford Helm team. So it's the Southeast Asian holistic evaluation of language models, right? Based on the original, well, inspired by the original Helm, but different in the sense that a lot of the tasks that are in Helm are actually not available in other languages. So what we did was we collated across a few languages at first. We collated a bunch of tasks from like natural language reasoning, natural language generation, natural language inference, and so on. And then we also created some of our own. And this is still something that we are tweaking and we're trying to improve on in terms of language coverage, in terms of task coverage, right? But what we have here is all publicly available as well. There's a leaderboard. You can also get the data sets and run the evaluations on Hugging Face now. So what tasks do we have then? We have instruction following, multi-turn chat, linguistic diagnostics, toxicity detection, summarization, quite a lot more. So this screenshot is actually a little bit outdated, but it's kind of, at this point, we have a lot of different variants, right? It's very difficult to capture everything. So I invite you to take a look for yourselves, right? So I mentioned multimodality just now, and this is important for us because we want our models to have real world applications, right? So the multimodality part is something that we see a lot of people who use our models, they keep asking for it, right? So we're really trying to focus a little bit more on this if we can, right? And then of course, long context is important, but other things like function calling, tool calling, and language coverage, right? These are also things that we're trying to address as we have more and more improved versions of C-Lion, right? Very happy to say that we last week we released a better C-Lion, and we also released a 4B version of Gemma C-Lion, right? So this was only post-training, but we're very happy to see that actually even with just post-training, we seem to be getting a little bit of modest gains in multilingual capabilities, right? And also we experimented with trying to impart a little bit of tool calling capabilities into Apertus. So we're really looking forward to 1.5 and 2, right? Where we can try and explore a lot more of those capabilities, right? With the Gemma variant, because it is a vision language model, we also looked at some of the specific, or I should say some more specific types of visual casting. It's a little bit small. I can read out to you. So we have we looked at Thai, Mandarin, and English, right? But we haven't developed a lot of these in detail yet. We are using off-the-shelf benchmarks for now, mostly in comparison to C-Helm, where we did a lot of translation, localization, validation with our native speakers, right? But moving forward, I think we really have to start thinking about how to design these. So happy to also collaborate on that. A lot of the work that we do is really contingent on the funding that we have, right? So how to get more funding, especially from the government? The government needs to see some kind of value proposition of C-Lion, right? I think this is something that we can agree on. Like ultimately, we have to be able to show that Gen AI is useful. Everybody agrees that it is part of digital infrastructure, but this really is the time people are starting to figure out like, well, how do we use AI, right? So we're really trying to work on this part as well, right? And we have a few success stories, very modest ones, right? We have like one of the largest tech companies in Indonesia. We worked with them to develop like a more specialized version of C-Lion, Sahabat AI. And we also have some use cases that are based in Singapore companies or based in some other non-profits, right? So hopefully this is something that really helps us to demonstrate that there is a way forward, even with open models, right? You don't necessarily need to use like copyrighted data and so on to build a model that is strong enough to support real use cases, right? And we're hoping to drive more of such conversations more and more so that people really start to see that like they do have a real choice, right? They don't necessarily have to always use ChatGPT or Gemini or DeepSeek, right? Okay, so this is just a quick timeline, right, of what we've been doing. So we started with a pre-training from scratch model, but we realized that there's not enough data. So then that's why we started doing continued pre-training, right? Or you know, the mid-training portion. And even then, we do acknowledge that we don't nearly have enough data yet to really bring out all of that multilingual performance, right? But again, here is where we're hoping that with more and more adoption, we actually can encourage people to contribute data to this open source effort. We really can encourage people to collaborate more and more, right? Because there is a very strong mutual benefit. Or rather, if we can show them that there is a very strong and mutually beneficial methodology here, then that will really continue to sustain this model, right? Okay. We've worked with a bunch of architectures, Gemma, Quen, Llama, and also now with sorry for leaving that out. This was an older slide. Okay. Our data sets are also available. So now we have CPAL v1 and CPAL v2. Those are also on Hugging Face. We are trying to build an open data platform, right? Now Project Aquarium is on v2. This one. Okay, yeah. To encourage people to use the models, we have these QR codes. You know, this is more for the user side of things. Okay, I will stop here. Thank you.
Okay, time for a 30-second question. Any takers? Yes.
Low resource languages, did you consider like synthetic approaches for generating data?
Yes. Definitely. So for post-training, it's a lot easier to have enough, quote unquote, enough data for to bring out like that high quality nature of the data, right? Because there's going to be a lot of repetition. There's going to be a lot of you know, models have their own biases, right? So whichever model it is that you use, you have to do a lot of filtering to make sure that the quality of the data is still there. So for pre-training, it's hard to get that bulk of data, so to speak. That's also part of the reason why with the more recent releases, we're trying to focus more on the post-training side first. We want to figure out like if we're trying to augment what we're doing with synthetic data, how far can we push this, right? So in short, yes, we can, but also there is a limit, right? Because if it's low resource, that means that the kind of data that you can generate using models that are out there is not that great either. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you.